So let's try all of that again, shall we? My name is Dmitry Grozoubinski. I'm 1/3 of All the Good Straight Puns Were Taken, a podcast that eventually fixes its sound issues. And today what I'd like to do is very briefly explain what the Northern Ireland Protocol command paper the UK government has just tabled is trying to fix, and what is at the heart of what it is proposing as a way forward. I'll also very happily take your questions, both throughout and when I'm done. But I mean, we're all just reading this thing for the first time, and it's a complicated issue on which I only know a little bit. So bear with me, if I screw it up. Let's, with no further ado, let's try again to get into what is the Northern Ireland Protocol and what is it trying to fix. So let's start with kind of the way things are now. What is the logic of the Northern Ireland Protocol if you strip away kind of everything else? The Brexit means that there has to be some form of goods border between the European Union single market and the United Kingdom. For a whole host of complicated political and historical reasons, the obvious place to put that, which is on the island of Ireland between Northern Ireland and the country of Ireland, was not desirable to anyone. And so there needed to be a solution for that, whereby there's still a border, but it is not where it should naturally go. The solution was this. So what you kind of see on the screen before you, which is the United Kingdom enforcing elements of their EU customs code and its rules within the Irish Sea border, so that by the time something actually enters Northern Ireland from either the rest of the world or from the rest of the UK, it has either cleared, it is effectively cleared to be in the single market, or it has guaranteed that it will not enter. That is kind of the headline. In terms of how it works in practice, goods arrive at that border, and there are really two kind of primary barriers that they need to overcome. There is the customs barrier, which you can see here in dot points in gray. And there is, I've written sanitary and phytosanitary, but really it's all sorts of standards barriers. So it has to prove that it's kind of declared itself to the EU, paid any appropriate tariffs, been transparent, etc. So that's customs. And then it has to also prove that it meets the requirements for what goods can be in the EU in terms of animal and vet health checks, but also some standards and stuff like that. So it has to do those two things. The way that the protocol was agreed and negotiated, the vast majority of goods that can go through effectively both of those checks. So things that cannot prove that they are staying in Northern Ireland have to go through customs, and then they have to comply with sanitary and phytosanitary. So that's kind of the compromise. Then for goods that can prove that they are staying exclusively in Northern Ireland and have no risk or insubstantial risk of ever ending up in the rest of Ireland or in the EU single market, they get to skip most of this customs step, but they still have to meet these sanitary and phytosanitary checks. Now keep in mind, crossing this kind of dotted line here is paperwork, it's expensive, it's onerous, it's almost not viable for really, really mixed and complicated consignments that have hundreds of different things in one lorry. It's costly and it's expensive. But in this kind of the way things are now, the calculation is very much, the calculation is very much like the burden of proof is effectively on the trader to try to prove that their stuff is staying in NI, in which case it gets to skip some of these procedures. Now, the UK government doesn't like that. It feels like that's not working. That's too onerous. So what is it suggesting? in this command paper as a possible way forward. So it's basically saying, okay, what if instead of the way the system currently works, any consignment that arrives in across that sea border, the business moving it basically self-declares through a fairly light touch system where the stuff is going. And if it says that it is going to Northern Ireland for Northern Ireland consumption, so basically the business says, listen, this isn't going into the single market, it effectively gets to skip both the customs step and the sanitary and phytosanitary step. So basically the argument is, listen, if they say it's going to stay in NI and they are willing to provide transparency over their supply chain, if they're willing to reveal where their stuff comes from, where it's going, then there's no need to make them jump through these hoops. It's staying in NI. It doesn't have to go through the customs, and it doesn't even need to comply with EU sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, just the sort of core Northern Ireland ones, because it's staying in Northern Ireland. The checks for both customs and sanitary and phytosanitary will occur exclusively for those goods where the business, the declarant, has said, hey, this stuff is going to the EU or single market, or maybe I can't guarantee it won't head to the EU and single market. And so those will get checked. What this effectively does, if you look at the size of the arrows and the length of the borders and what's happening, is it is about shifting the balance between risk and trade facilitation, which is actually a lot of what trade and customs is, if you think about it. Under the existing protocol, the emphasis is very much on controlling risk. The fundamental assumption is that something is headed into the EU and single market, and thus needs to be checked against the EU customs code, and the EU sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, unless it can really make a strong case that it's not. Under the new, that means a lot more friction, but a lot less risk for the EU single market of things ending up there that shouldn't be or that haven't gone through the procedures. The new system flips that on its head. Instead, the kind of burden, there's a self-declared system and there's some transparency, but really the level of risk control decreases substantially. But the ease of getting things into Northern Ireland, at least from the UK, substantially decrease. Because basically, if you just said it's going to NI and you provided the transparency, that is the assumption, and so you don't have to go through these barriers.